minutes. We'll give people a few more minutes to come on. Okay, here we go.
Goes.
Peter, I'm not muted, so. Hi, everybody. If you're joining us, we're just waiting for more attendees to come on. We have about 19 people so far who've logged on, and I think we're waiting for 20 or 30 more. So. Well, thanks for joining us, everyone. We're still going to give a few more people time to come on. We're still a little short of 7 o'clock, but I thought I'd just take away the shared screen and say hi and make sure everybody knows that we're here, we're live. I'd sing a song for you, but my voice is really terrible, so you're not going to get that. I don't have any jokes prepared, so you're not going to get that either. And what is that bonging noise?
I have it here. Who's bonking?
So it's 7 o'clock. I think we're going to start. Welcome, everyone. Hi, I'm Mindy Tousely. I'm the Executive Director of the Artists Archives. I'm going to be your host for tonight's presentation, Home to Home Part 2. Our co-host for tonight is the rest of the archive staff. We have Megan Alves, our Marketing and Programming Manager, and Kelly Pontoni, who is our Collections Registrar.
Nice to be here.
Kelly, can you unmute yourself? Because I can't unmute you. There you go.
Good evening. Hi, everyone.
So thanks for coming. Before we start, I just want to let you know that Kelly and Megan are going to be helping out with some of the technical aspects of tonight's program. Megan's going to be manning the chat line and the audience Q&A, which we're going to hold that till the end, by the way. And Kelly is going to help mute and unmute people as we go through. I'm just going to turn over to Megan for a minute, and she can just explain a few things for those of you who are not real familiar with Zoom. She'll just tell you a little bit about how to chat and about questions and answers.
Thank you, Mindy. Hi, everyone. Welcome to part 2 of our virtual artist talks. Just a little housekeeping before we begin. If you are familiar with Zoom or not, what you can do is there's a chat feature, so you're able to interact with people, not the panelists, but you're able to comment while they're talking. How you get there is that if you were to hover over the bottom of your screen, you'll see an icon that says chat. Once you actually click the chat icon, you'll see chats scrolling in the right-hand side. Important point, you will also see a to and a drop-down menu. You'll have a choice between all panelists and all panelists and attendees. You want to make sure to use the all panelists and the attendees. That way the other people joining the chat can actually talk too. So that's how you're going to be able to do that. And then there's also a wonderful question and answer function. Very close to your chat icon, there's going to be a Q&A, 2 little bubbles next to each other. And when you click on that, you'll be able to type a question. Please preface it with the name of the artist, last name is fine, who you'd like to actually address that question to. And then other panelists or other attendees, if you like it, you can upvote it by hitting like. So if we get a lot of likes, those ones are going to go to the top of the stack, but we usually have time to get to all of them. So definitely questions there, chat on the side, and that should be everything. So thank you so much for coming.
Thanks, Megan. I'd like to thank our funders before we start, the Ohio Arts Council, the voters of Cuyahoga County through Cuyahoga Arts and Culture, the David E. Davis Foundation, the Gunn Foundation, the Cleveland Foundation, Zoo Fall, and our members, our board of directors, and our volunteers. Thanks everybody for supporting the archives, programs like this, and just helping us through this difficult time. Now, our guests for tonight's program are all archived artists. They all are a part of our 2020 members exhibition, which is up right now in our gallery space, which you cannot see, but hopefully we can reopen sometime back in June, and we will have the show up for people at that time. So this was a way for us to bring these artists to you into your home, to let you see what they're doing, give you some examples of what they're working on currently, as well as maybe some of their studio spaces. There are 108 artists in our members show right now. You can't see the show in person, but all of the work is up on our website, so it's all accessible to you. The website is www.artistarchives.org, and that will be on a slide at the end of this presentation if you want to write it down. So you can look at their work there. We're also doing regular Facebook posts and Instagram posts, kind of spotlight featuring artists as part of the show, and that's been ongoing. Most of the work in the show is for sale, and if you're interested in buying something, please just contact us at the archives through the website. Your support through buying a piece of artwork not only helps the local artists, but it also helps the archives too, so we really appreciate that. It's kind of a win-win situation for everybody. You get a great piece of art, we get a little bit of support, and the artists get a lot of support. So thanks very much for that. I think we can get started. The order which we're going to present artists to you tonight are Lee Heinen, Margaret Arthur, Stuart Pearl, and Rebecca Kaler. And I did not unmute everyone so they could say hi to you, so I think we'll just kind of skip that and we'll go right into the presentation. Our first artist tonight is going to be Lee Heinen. And I will say that Lee Heinen was archived in 2001. Among her many accolades as an artist, she has received an Ohio Arts Council Award for Excellence in 2017, and she was a spotlight artist whose work was in the Governor's Mansion in 2015. She has a beautiful studio in Little Italy, and we really wanted her to be in the studio for you tonight, but unfortunately, there's no Wi-Fi there, and it just wasn't working out. So what we've done instead is Kelly and Lee made a videotape yesterday of Lee in her studio talking about her work. And so we're going to show you the videotape. And then, as Megan said, we're going to do Q&A at the end of this whole presentation. And so at that point, Lee can talk to you about her work. I do want to say that if you have questions, please remember to preface the questions for the artists that they are directed to. And if it's a general question for all the artists, just don't put the artist name. We'll know it's general, and then we'll kind of give it up to everyone to answer as they will. I'm going to turn my screen over to Kelly, and she's going to share this video with us. Thank you. Kelly, I'm not hearing any audio.
Back first, which is where older works, for the most part, are stored. So, racks and racks back here. And several of my abstracts are here. Virtually all of the abstract paintings are paint-overs. They're works that I've pulled out of the rack and thought, oh, I've moved on, I'm not happy with this anymore. I take a palette knife to it, usually. And this is one of them. This painting, they all have a history under there. If you look carefully, you can see he was once a dog. I went through a whole series of doing dog paintings. These, they were something from nature. They were from my kind of landscape era. But once I discover new things that I'm excited about, I kind of lose interest in the older ones. And if they don't move off the shelf rapidly, they may become something else. Now, speaking of older, I'll get back to that in a minute. I just unearthed this, let's say. I didn't even remember. The light's not hitting that very well, is it? Okay. Hope you can see it. Anyway, that was a self-portrait I did. I'm sure it was for a class assignment. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing a self-portrait. I'm estimating it was in the 70s. So it was kind of a fun thing for me to revisit. And so that'll give you an idea, a sense of the range, all the periods I've gone through. Some others represent that a little bit. Here's one, that's what I would call this one. Mitchell period. I've taken interest in the art, and I may produce several paintings with that kind of influence. Then I move on, and some of it is incorporated in things I do subsequently. Some others not. Anyway, these are the racks. This is part of a series of images that I've done on mirrored steel. And one of the things I love about these is the fact that as you move by them, the viewer becomes a part of them. Also, they change according to where you're standing. As you move by it, background is distorted, slightly distorted. So they're ever changing and interesting. That one I call self-portrait. It was actually out in nature. I was looking over a gorge, but you wouldn't know that. So anyway, let's talk about things that I'm doing closer at hand now. Oh, one of the dog paintings, it's right there. If continue on a bit with the mirrored one. Here's another mirrored image right here. Now, what I've been doing for the last 10 or so years have been figurative works. And I've done them in a pop style so that they're flattened and simplified. And I guess I was channeling Alex Katz without really knowing that. But when I saw the show that was Katz show at the museum of his early work a few years ago, I was just amazed. Because I'd never seen that work. I'd only seen his recent work, like the Big Ada paintings. And what he was doing and what he was thinking about so paralleled what I had been doing. That, you know, it was, this happens, this sort of thing happens a lot in the art. But I was impressed with that. So, anyway, I don't necessarily want these people, these are not people in my family or people that I know. Many times they are, models are. But I want everyone viewing it to be able to relate to it and make it their own and give it their interpretation of who it is. I've called this series the American Family Album Series because I work from photos. I did a book on this. That's the cover of the book. That one's called Generations. And those people are my relatives. The baby was my grandmother and on back from there. But I don't want it strictly, you know, it doesn't matter who the models are. I think that these are experiences that most American families have. Witness up north in the canoe, here up here. And, you know, I think we all have pictures of this nature in our family albums. And you may not have a picture of this nature in your family album. And this one I find amusing. And how scratchy those wool bathing suits must have been. That was from an old photograph that was a whole room length long. And I just plucked certain fingers and put them together and added a viewer from behind there. So I mean, I have fun with those things. Oh, another one that I did because I thought it was amusing is this guy up here, fishing. I like the shapes. That's the color and composition are the things that really attract me. Football players may be frustrated by my, or football fans, maybe flummoxed by my interpretation. I see them as dancers and admire their athleticism. They fly through space in the most amazing ways. Yeah, I left out parts of them because they just seem unnecessary. I think your mind completes the picture. This one is another one that's kind of minimal. I left parts of it out. The beach scene. Again, a family theme. And that was drawn, I think, from my trip to Cuba. Travel has influenced me a great deal in the last half dozen or so years. The only abstract that's out here. And that one was not a paint over. That one I did from the get-go. So you can read into it. I kind of see rocks and landscapes, but not everyone that comes in views it that way. Now, this, what the family on the yellow background here is pretty typical of what I've done in recent years. I'm interested in their interaction, their expressive body language. You know, you just imagine the storyline there. And I see a great deal of parental pride in that one. And from the family album theme, some images of my travels have been prominent in recent work. those women I saw in either Abu Dhabi or Dubai, somewhere on the Asian Peninsula. I can't tell you. I assembled them from different images I took. I took a lot of pictures of them. And of course, you know, what the message there for me is that little girl dressed in the blue dress one day is going to be dressed in the black abaya. This is one of several. I've done several along from that trip, and the impressions I had of the contrasts in that part of the world. The modernity in their buildings, their shopping centers, the grandest and the greatest. They love the biggest of everything. And yet, these tribal traditions that are so present. The contrast, though, between them and the tourists is remarkable also. One of the things that I was fascinated with was in the luxury hotels, we actually witnessed, it was like a fashion show, but it was a sale of fashions. They had abayas on racks, and they had the dresses they wore under them. And they had a lot of young women that were wearing their abayas like dusters flowing behind them, in high heels and lovely dresses underneath. I love that scene. They're the contrasts are all mixed together in one person, or a few persons, a few young women. So let's see, from that, these are my most recent works, and probably the most related to the period we're going through now. So I've moved from the external to the internal, and imagining what might be going on in many people's heads dealing with all this. There's been a renewed interest in nature. We see many people out in the parks and strolling. I see more people on the streets now when we have a warm day. And I think there may be some distress in some minds also, which is more easily represented for me in abstraction. These are, you know, the nature themes. I'm working on, I have an endless supply in my head of images that I might use in that way. One is food. I mean, so many people are so into food now. Games, lots of different things that could be going on in people's heads. These are two that I wanted to show stages of how they approach it. This one is in an early stage, and I'm going to be, you know, putting in patterns in their bodies. This one is kind of the next stage where I've drawn in some suggestions of the patterns I will be using there in their heads, because this one's going to be more akin to that. Different colors, paint. But that's kind of moving toward a completed image. So we didn't take a look at Roger's work. These are older pieces, because much of his recent work is tied up in a show at Moreland Courts now. However, this one was not completed when we did the show at Moreland Courts. And this one is his most recent, and I think quite successful. I'll get out of the way so you can take a little better look. And he has a history of writing about and speaking about churches in Cleveland. Now, mind you, all these churches are not Cleveland churches, but he's done a whole series that's related to that part of his history. So let's see, who else we can talk about? So, I do have a few originals here in the print rack. And again, a variety of things that I've done. That was my O'Keeffe period. It's probably shiny, I doubt if it shows up very well. Okay. All right. And then the others are just giclées. So I think that's about it. You may have questions, and I'll be available at the end of all this to hopefully answer some of them.
Thanks, Lee. That was great. That was really interesting. I forgot to mention before we started the video that Lee does share her studio with Roger Welchins, so you saw some of his work too. Roger's also an archived artist. He is one of the authors of The Archive Speaks, and he's not part of this presentation tonight because he's not part of the members show this year. But if you really want to see a little bit more of his work and hear about how he makes his work, we have a wonderful video that we produced as part of our oral history project, and that is on our website. You can find it under the Archived Artists. Just go to his name and click on it, and the video will be towards the bottom of the page. And I recommend checking that out if you haven't seen it. So our next artist up is Margaret Arthur. Margaret has been an educator for many years with Tri-C. She archived also in 2001. We have an extensive collection of her work, and most of her work that we have is very, very large. We probably have over 50 pieces. She holds a BFA from Cleveland Institute of Art and an MFA from Kent State. Because Margaret's work is very large, and she did want to talk at the beginning of her presentation about some of this older work, I am going to share my screen again, and while she's talking, I'm just going to show you a few of the pieces that illustrate what she's talking about, and then we're going to flip totally to her home, where she will show you what she's been working on lately. So let me see if I can do this. There we go. And okay. And Margaret, if you'd like to start, Kelly or Megan, could you unmute her, please?
It is not working for me. Megan, will you try?
Okay, let me try. Okay, I'll unmute her. Not working for me either. It's always something, you guys. Okay.
Hold on one second, Margaret. We're gonna get you unmuted.
Okay,
Okay, she's good.
is it good now?
Yes, yes,
Okay, you
good.
can hear me?
yes.
Okay. All right, so you're just gonna show these as I give my little.
Yeah, can you see them on your screen, Margaret? They should be
Yes.
up big. Yep,
Yeah,
okay.
I see Klinger. Okay.
Yep.
52
Yeah.
by 56. Okay, well, I'll start by saying hi, everyone. This is Margaret Arthur. I would like to give you a little insight into my work. The painting that I have in the members show is called Paper or Plastic, Trauma Under the Sea. It is a social commentary about the damage done by the plastic and trash that we sadly find in our oceans and lakes. In this painting, the image of the stork, which is covered with plastic, comes from an actual photo in National Geographic magazine, as does the image of the turtle, who is encased in plastic rings, which we find when we buy a 6-pack of soda pop. My early work was quite different from the work that I'm doing now, which you can see on the screen. I used to paint large 5-foot by 6-foot, sometimes larger, abstract oil paintings that were filled with large energetic brush strokes and layers of color. Sometimes I worked with gallons of house paint, which I would purchase from the Glidden paint store. I could get a really cheap variety of colors from customers that had paint specially mixed for them, and then they either changed their mind or they made a mistake. I could get a gallon of paint for $2. Also, I had a huge studio space on the 6th floor of the Art Craft building downtown. That was a dream come true for me, and it inspired me to make these large paintings. Then after 9/11, everything changed. I had a special bond with New York City, as I spent a lot of time there visiting the art galleries and the art culture. had also been to the Twin Towers several times. I even had Sunday brunch at the Windows of the World restaurant at the very top of the building. So when the Twin Towers fell, I was profoundly affected. Gradually, my work began to change, and my paintings introduced symbolism and narrative. Originally, I was influenced by the abstract expressionists such as William de Kooning, Franz Klein, and early Philip Guston. Now, I was influenced by later Philip Guston, who used strange symbols and imagery. Particularly, he painted variations of shoes in his works that represented humanity. I thought that was kind of a neat thing because I started out as a figurative artist. So the idea of putting shoes in my paintings to represent humanity, I thought was brilliant. So particularly after the war in Afghanistan and Iraq, my shoe imagery started to change into army boots, which you saw in the previous image. The army boots are piled up. And another thing that I like to depict, I would put the shoes in a landscape with Edgar Allan Poe's Raven, which came from his poem Nevermore. My message was clear. The shoes were representing humanity, and they were protesting a terrible war. So I found I could use them almost as figures to make a statement. The Raven was the onlooker, and he was calling out a warning that we needed to pay attention to. So then I began putting other symbols in there that were witnesses to the scene that I was painting. Sometimes the shoes were piled up in a pyramid. Sometimes they were arranged in a sort of a balancing act, which mirrored the balancing act of life, which challenges us every day. Eventually, I was no longer able to support a studio, and so I began working at home in my basement. Then I sold my house, and I'm currently living with my daughter. So making large paintings is no longer an option. So now my work is greatly reduced in size. My challenge is still to paint narratives that have social significance and can tell a story that makes an impact on a smaller scale. So in this series that I'm going to show you now, I have focused on such topics as global warming, pollution, school shootings, and political commentary. So the first piece I'm going to show you is called, okay, is it showing up? This is called Alternate Solutions. Is it in the frame okay? Yeah. And it shows the smokestack, the fossil fuels spewing into the air. And below you can see the shoes piled up,
Right.
are representing humanity, basically us. And the hand on top is a huge hand wearing a rubber glove that is trying to stop the smoke from the smokestack. But of course, we know that does not work. So that addresses one problem. And now we go from toxic air to toxic water. This piece is called Flint, Michigan. And you can see all the symbolism. Of course, the water tower tells you it's Flint. And you see the toxic water, which actually contained lead, coming out of the faucet, which actually happened when people in Flint would turn their faucet on. So you see the symbols of poison, dirty water, and the horrified young girl in the foreground looking totally dismayed at what was going on. On the very top, you see the shoes, only this time the shoes have legs attached. So this is us surveying and witnessing the scene. Okay. All right, so now we go to, this represents school shootings. And I titled it American Landscape, which kind of gives a jolt to the viewer when they see the title. It shows the little schoolhouse on a hill, and there's an ominous buzzard, vulture type of bird standing there on the hill. You see the shoes, and again, the shoes are in disarray and upside down, which kind of shows you the chaos that's going on. Okay, so again, a lot of symbols in that piece. Now, this one's very different, but it still represents a school shooting. The silhouettes on the bottom, can you see that whole thing? The silhouettes on the bottom come from an actual photograph of the students trying to evacuate the school. They were told to go single file and put their hands on each other's shoulders. And I just thought that was a chilling image. So I painted that in there. And then on the top is another representation of the feet scurrying from the scene. Down here on the bottom is kind of a monster face who again is witnessing the scene. And ironically, this comes from a children's classic story, Where the Wild Things Are. So there's a lot of metaphors in there. Okay. Okay, now we go to my political commentary. Okay, this addresses the immigration crisis. And unfortunately, the bottom part has imagery of a little infant shoes, baby bottle, teddy bear. So what they're talking about was separating children, even infants, from the parents at the border. And of course, there's Lady Liberty looking at the scene and little tears in her eyes. So however you feel about immigration, there has to be a better solution. That's my opinion. Okay, now this is lastly another tragedy. This is called Inferno in Paradise. And it talks about the horrible fires in Paradise, California, which is why Paradise is in the title, right? It kind of gives a little bit of familiarity because of the cubism and this horrifying figure, which I borrowed from Picasso's Guernica. And I you know, spliced up the landscape to kind of give it an edge. So we have the fire and the screaming lady and the little small helicopter hopefully coming to the rescue. So anyway, those are things that I find in our everyday living that stirs me, and I paint it. So I hope that gives you a little insight on what I'm doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Margaret.
Thank you.
That was wonderful. Thank you.
I hope you saw everything okay.
I think we did, yeah. Yeah, it looked great.
Good.
Our next artist up is Stuart Pearl. Stuart is a professional photographer. He believes very strongly in promoting Cleveland through his visual storytelling. He comes from a family of artists. His late father is Moses Pearl, who's also an archived artist and was an acclaimed painter in the area for many years, as well as an educator. His sister Charlene is also a painter, and she's been on the teaching staff of Tri-C West for many years herself. Stuart volunteers his skills at lots of different organizations, and you're going to see some of his interests in the work that he shows you. And he is, in fact, our current board president. He was archived in 2017, so he's kind of a baby. Stuart, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, I guess I'm the baby of the group here, but thank you for all for enjoying, for attending the second episode of Lockdown Lounge here under the pandemic. I appreciate everybody attending. And as far as photography, that's my thing. I've been a photographer from my earliest days. I got very seriously into it back in high school. And once I went off to college, that's when I really got into it. And I began shooting for local college newspapers, Miami University, Kent State University. And back in those early days, we were all doing film. It was pre-digital, and was pretty active in the local documentary scene. Got a couple pictures from those days. You might recognize some of these people. Elton John there. Okay. Back during an earlier presidential election, there's Ted Kennedy. For those of you into classical music, oops, there's Leonard Bernstein. And for those of you into late night pop music, Doc Severinsen. So back in those days, I did have a traditional darkroom, and at that time we all shot film. Okay, typical little film canister there. And in 2006, I transitioned into digital photography, and now all the images get stored on these little memory cards, which are pretty fantastic. Part of my current equipment that I use, one of my main cameras. I don't really have a studio in the sense of a traditional portrait studio. What I have around me are my computers. When I'm done with the shoot, I import the images into Photoshop, and that's literally my digital electronic processing lab. So during the Corona lockdown, what have I been up to? Well, there are several things here, and I'm going to attempt to share my PowerPoint here. Let's see if this works. Oops. Almost. Okay, I hope everybody can see that. My wife Jean and I, we love to hike and walk. We're longtime Metro Parks volunteers, also at the Holden Arboretum. We like to hike our national parks. And we were just hiking around Lyndhurst. I love fog. It really mutes colors and comes up with some nice design work and interesting saturations of tonal density and whatnot. So that's by one of our community centers there. And then this is at the end of my street, pretty close to my backyard. There's a ball field off to the left there. Just love the way the mist was just kind of filtering through the trees. There's the ballpark itself. And this is my backyard. Those are some of my neighbors. I think they're quite annoyed that I haven't refilled my bird feeders yet. They have a habit of coming out and hoovering everything out of that, in addition to munching on all my hosta. Another thing I'm up to is we really like going to the North Chagrin Metro Parks. We do a lot of volunteer work there. They have a wonderful trail system there. And one of them is called the Wildflower Trail. And we've been going there for the past 4 to 5 weeks, once a week. It's about a 2.5 mile loop trail. And we were hoping to see the flowers as they've been coming out. These are called trout lilies because the pattern on the green leaf is kind of sort of a speckled, mottled brown like you see on some rainbow trout. And those little flowers there, I used a macro lens to get some extreme close-ups. Those little flowers are about 3/4 of an inch long, so that'll give you an idea as to size. This is called a cut leaf toothwort, and it has a very interesting leaf pattern, kind of reminiscent of some plant that a lot of my friends used to use back in college, but it renders into a very beautiful blossom when it flowers out. This next one is the common white trillium. These are found pretty much everywhere in this climate, and you probably have a lot more of them than you realize. The problem is that the deer just love them. To them, this is dessert. And the moment they see any blossoms coming up, they snip it up, and that's the end of it. They also do come in a red variety. Those are A little harder to find though. And this is called Dutchman's breeches for an obvious pattern there. If you look at those, they're upside down, but they look like the balloon-like pantaloons of Europeans there. All right. And then this last one, this is the common Christmas fern, and those are known as fiddleheads. As these things come up in the springtime, they're kind of, wrapped up in this, like, fiddlehead type, pattern, and then they just kind of unroll as they heat up in the sun and things get in towards summer. So that's pretty much the end of our wildflower trail. Another project that I've been into with the Metro Parks is I do a lot of photography for them. And a couple years back, I worked on a field guide book on snails and slugs of the Cleveland Metro Parks. And working closely with some naturalists and artists, we discovered that there's far more to mollusks and snails than drawn butter, salt, and garlic. And I did a lot of macro photography for them. But on this one, we're doing fish, freshwater fish of Northeast Ohio. That is a striped shiner. And we used a very interesting methodology for photographing these guys. Again, I got together with 3 other naturalists, and we went out to Wildwood Park, the West Creek watershed, and then also the Rocky River river area behind their nature center. And there's something called electrofishing. And the way this is done is one of the naturalists wades into the water wearing something that looks like a Ghostbusters backpack, and he has what appears to be like a giant TV antenna that he immerses in the water, and he presses a button which sends voltage through the lake, the river, the whatever, zaps all the fish within about a 20-foot radius. It temporarily stuns them. They float to the surface. He nets them, brings them over to me where I've got some special exhibition tanks. We put them in a tank, and then I use my macro lens to photograph them close up. And again, this is the striped shiner. This is a male rainbow darter. And to give you an idea of size, he's only about this big. So that's about 2 inches, but he was just an absolutely gorgeous guy. I shot about 40 or 50 different fish. Don't have them here tonight, just kind of the more representative ones. This is called a red-side dace. They love to school. These were in some of the aquariums at the West Creek Nature Center there. And these are not, really popped up in Photoshop or anything. This is pretty much how their colors naturally look, and they're just absolutely gorgeous, just spectacular. This is a yellow bullhead catfish, and this guy was totally not cooperative at all when I was trying to photograph him. Matter of fact, he was just kind of flat and laying there. So, well, they say that when you have lemons, make lemonade out of them, and I decided to turn him into a bit of an abstract as he was giving me some tail going away from the lens. And here's another view of the striped shiner. Again, he looks like he's a pretty good size, but this guy was, probably only about that big. So that's about 3.5 inches long. And this last one, this is a smallmouth bass. And he was those can be pretty big. This one was about that big in size. So that was my recent work on the fish guide of critters of Northeast Ohio. That's going to appear eventually in the bookshop or in the of the Metro Parks there. I did most of this shooting several months ago, and over the past couple of months in lockdown here, I've been spending a lot of time in Photoshop processing them. Okay. And in addition to that, a few years back, I worked on another book. This was for the Cleveland Museum of Art, and it was entitled Cleveland Museum of Art, A Portrait. And I was actually hired by famed photographer and fellow archived artist, Jenny Jones, to be her second shooter as we photographed the building just as they were finishing up the addition that they had been building onto it. She did a lot of the inside work, and I was outside climbing over dirt piles and snow piles and things like that. So that's the story, and I'm sticking to it. Thank you.
Stuart, that was great. The fish are amazing.
They're pretty spectacular. It was I probably took about about 900 photographs over a period of several months at the 3 different locations, and this will be distilled down to probably about 20 or 30 photographs inside the guidebook, along with some fabulous illustrations by my friends, the naturalists, who also a couple of them are fine art artists themselves.
Thanks. Don't forget to unshare your screen so we can go back.
Okay, thanks for reminding me. All right.
And just a quick reminder for all of our wonderful panelists that are, I'm sorry, attendees that are here, which is 71 at this point. If you have a question for any of the artists, go ahead and use the Q&A icon at the bottom, and we'll be able to actually have the artist answer at the end. So just a reminder. Thanks so much.
So our next artist up is Rebecca Kaler. And Rebecca is actually the baby of the Archived Artists, because she came into the archive in 2018. She's, like all of our other artists, she's shown her work very extensively for over 20 years. She was the curator of the Pearl Conrad Gallery of the, that was the O'Sullivan? Is that right, Rebecca? At Mansfield for 20
The
years?
Pearl Conard, yeah, Conard Gallery at Ohio State University, Mansfield.
Thank you. And she does have a studio in Mansfield also, which she has not been able to get to recently. So she's coming to you from her home. So she's a little bit cramped, but she's still doing some great work. And so I'm going to just turn it over to you and mute myself so you can go, Rebecca.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Rebecca Kaler, and welcome to the studio at home. The quarantine has affected all of us and made us all worry about this and that. And I do consider myself fortunate to not have some of the problems that others have with regard to employment and childcare and so on, illness, not to mention that. But the time that I'm using here is not a whole lot different from being retired. So, I mean, time-wise, it's about the same for me. And being somewhat introverted to begin with, being quarantined hasn't been the hugest problem I have ever encountered. What I've been working on started about a year ago. And I'm going to take this phone and switch it back so that I can give you a tour. I'm going to turn it around. Oops, it didn't work. It didn't go, Mindy.
No, actually it did go. Go ahead and do it again.
Oh, there it goes. Okay, sorry about that. Okay. All right then. I have been working on a series of abstracts, and it started a year ago when I was in my studio down in Mansfield thinking about paintings that I had done that were not very successful. And, you know, they just didn't pan out. A lot of artists paint over them, which I had done also. So those are works of art that were obscured for eternity. And then I thought, well, why not make this something intentional? So I set upon a series that I call the Concealment Series. And what I'm doing is I am making paintings underneath, and I do them in several layers. Each layer has to dry. So this is a process that takes weeks because each one has to dry. When I have enough layers underneath and I'm kind of satisfied with what it is and how it's going to read, I will paint it out. I don't paint out the entire thing because I want to leave these little windows. These little windows reveal that there was something obscured, that there's something behind what you see on the surface. It's kind of, I guess, voyeuristic in a way, and secretive maybe, and doesn't everybody have a little something they want to hide or a secret that they need to keep? So you know, it sort of reflects that. And this particular one, I'm going to back up because it's really one work. It's a triptych. You can't see it all because it's not a display piece right now, but it's 30 by 90. And all the pieces connect together. And I did give this one a name for some reason. I called it Head in the Clouds. And then this one over here is again in the same series. I tend to work in series, and I do it until I'm exhausted with it, or it exhausts itself, because I don't like, I don't know, just need to change and evolve. And each of these pieces evolves, but I want to show you kind of up close some of the, excuse me, some of the windows that I'm talking about. Down here at the bottom, I've saved out a space here. And moving over to this other one, which is also a fairly recent piece. I think I posted that one somewhere. And again, and when I start these paintings, I do work from thumbnail sketches or other sketches. I'll work from doodles. I do lots of sketching at any given time. Most of those ideas don't work out. This is from a previous series. There are only 5 of these landscapes, and I'll just move close and then move away. So I want to talk a little bit, oh no, I forgot this one. When I talk about thumbnails and doing little sketches, can you see that right there? It's just a tiny little thing. That piece became this piece. And I still consider it a work in progress. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do with it. So I don't consider it a finished work of art yet. This one may fall into the concealment series where I go over it and change everything, and then it's going to have the mystery behind it. From some of my thumbnails, you know, something like this will evolve, I mean. Also, for the non-artists that are out there, I want to mention something about the process of doing all of this. It all starts in the beginning on a frame. Now, most of my stretchers, like this one, are handmade by a carpenter in Galion, Ohio. And as you can see, this is quite a substantial piece. It's very heavy duty plywood in the back with the cross bases, and then we got some brace bars in the corner. And then I staple raw canvas like this. This is a heavy gauge canvas. I'll staple that to the piece. And then I cover it with a ground called gesso. Now the gesso, I will do probably 3 to 5 coats of gesso on these, where I paint it, sand it. It has to dry, and then, you know, I paint it again, and then it dries, and so on and so forth. And because I want to create a certain kind of surface and sometimes remove some of the texture from that to keep it smoother. So that's how that process starts. And then we begin with the layering of things. This is a work in progress. It might start out something like this. It's not nearly being finished. That's just sort of ground to cover right now, and then I will elaborate and do a whole bunch of stuff over top of that. So this is the studio. As for, I should address color. I don't really adhere to any particular palette. I don't rely on a palette for anything, because I think all color has equal opportunity. I like them all, and utilize many colors in the paintings for the most part. Let's see. And that's kind of where I've been spending my quarantine time.
Thanks, Rebecca. Were there any other little pictures that you wanted to show us in your studio? I thought that.
Oh,
showed us some
I
smalls.
can. What I do oftentimes, like a piano player that practices his scales on the piano to keep his fingers limber, I will revert to doing some kind of fun things. Is that visible, my little bunny? Is that little bunny? So I keep a hand in doing these, mainly because it helps clear cobwebs. It's one of those kinds of things that maybe I won't have any particular big idea that I want to do. So I mess around with doing other little paintings. This particular one, I should take it down and put it in the light down here. This is an aerial view of cattle from Colorado. That was part of a series, and most of those pieces are gone to other owners. That one was I had an attack of nostalgia about when I used to live in Colorado, and I did a whole bunch of cowboys and cowgirls and cows and things like that. And then, and these are, actually those are a couple pieces that go to the I Was Here series that are not at the archive. Basically, that's it. If anybody has any questions, the messy table, as you can see, is the place where I do my work.
Thanks, Rebecca. That was great. So, you know, that's it for our artists. So I think we're going to turn it over to Megan and the questions and answers. If you guys have any more questions, I know we have 7 down there. I'm going to unmute just Megan, and then we're going to start the Q&A. There we go. Oh, sorry, muted again. There you go.
There we go. Hi, everyone.
Clicking.
Road clicking. Oh, well, thank you so much for all your questions, and all these artists were so amazing. So it is, I am going to start with one for our first presenter, Lee Heinen. So I'm going to go ahead and unmute you, Lee. And
Yes.
Lee, so your question, so this was actually a little bit of an economic question, but I believe it's a fan club question. How many paintings do you sell in a year? So I think they're more asking just, do you enjoy good sales? I think they're asking.
I'm having a little difficulty hearing you, Megan.
Sure.
Would you repeat it?
Absolutely. Someone was wondering if you do end up selling a lot of paintings during the year.
It varies greatly. You know, some years are good years and some not so much. I certainly wouldn't want to have to make a living doing that. I'd have to approach it much more rigorously. Marketing is not my forte.
Well, I'm glad that you're focusing on production instead of doing all that other extraneous stuff. It keeps you pure creatively. I think it's wonderful. So there is, next one we're going to do, so I'm going to go ahead and take you, mute you. Next one is going to be for Stuart Pearl. Get you, Stu. So Stu, everybody was really impressed with just how sharp and how amazing those images were. We were going nuts over the fish, especially. And the flowers wanted to know that, Barbara Bachtel actually wanted to know that if the majority of the nature subjects you photograph are actually in the Cleveland Metro Parks system.
Yes, absolutely. Like I said, Jean and I have been Metro Parks volunteers for probably about 40 years between the two of us. And we have our favorite trails in Acacia, North Chagrin, South Chagrin, that sort of thing. So, you know, depending upon the season of the year, we'll, you know, hit certain trails looking for certain things. And like I said, if you go to the North Chagrin Reservation, right off of Route 91 by Strawberry Lane, they do have it's clearly marked, it's the Wildflower Trail. And you can see a variety of flowers, you know, there throughout the year. But by all means, explore the other parks. And, you know, you'll see definitely different ones in the other locations too.
Thanks. Yeah, and I know that Stuart actually has done an entire documentarian series about the transition from Acacia, from a golf course, all the way over to a natural state. And so that was actually featured in an artist archive exhibition called Environmental Impact, and that was in 2019, if I haven't muddled my years up, right? Dead on. Thanks, Stu. Our next one is going to be, going right along, I'm going to have one for Rebecca. So Rebecca, let me get you all done up. Rebecca, I had a lot of questions concerning what you were working in as far as your media. Were you working in acrylic or oil for most of your works?
Most of my work is in oil, which is why it takes a long drying time. And I did one thing I forgot to mention was, well, there were two things I forgot to mention, was why I work in abstract. And, I could do representational, and I have done it, obviously, but if it's okay, I just want to explain that.
Yeah, go for it, Rebecca, please.
Is that all right? Because,
yeah, absolutely.
Because when we abstract things, we remove the familiar world. We remove the storytelling. We remove any historical reference. We take away all of our connections, and that results oftentimes in something very primal. And when it's a primal response or a primal action, people tend to get very emotional. They'll have an emotional response, which may not always be positive, because they're always looking for something real, something to relate to. I want this to look like something, and they'll search for it to be like something. But to remove all of that then creates the primal experience.
That makes my art historian heart explode. Hearing you say that, it's such a good explanation of abstract versus representational. Boom, love it. And then I actually have one from Margaret, actually. So let me get you Margaret.
Yes.
Margaret, so you referenced Edgar Allan Poe as one of your influences, and I was wondering if there was any other literary influences in your work, any other authors that actually inspire you?
Well, I read a lot of every kind of work, but what inspired me was the bird image more than the author. When I saw that bird, I thought that is exactly what I'm looking for, something that can witness what's going on in a way that makes you think about it, There perhaps are other ones, but I am influenced by a lot of other artists, like the Guernica influence and things like that, which creep in. But as far as a particular author, it's wide open, yeah.
I love that the raven is a metaphor of watching and observing. That's amazing.
Right.
I have, I have several large ones, but I have one more specific one before we have some for all of the artists, but I'm going to do the last specific one, which is to Stuart Pearl. And Stu, I am going to say that it does say Dad. Stuart Pearl. So it's from Jennifer. Your photography has evolved a lot over the years. What led to those changes? Let me unmute you. Go for it. Oh, hold on. Did we get him? 1 second, Stu. I'm so sorry. There you go. Go for it.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Boy, that's a complicated question. I guess I've always been a documentary photographer, and I like to use the camera to tell stories. Am I muted?
No, we can hear you, Stu.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay.
Yeah, you're perfect.
All right. And, the documentation started back in college when I was a newspaper photographer. Shortly after that, I started photographing weddings, social events, do a lot of volunteer work for, WVIZ Idea Stream. And the evolutionary part of it was I enjoy the activity of photography, and whatever the client needed, it was my task to, find a solution to, fulfill, what they wanted. And sometimes that was with equipment, sometimes that was with technique, sometimes with creativity. And, over the years that developed, As I said, it started out in film, and it wasn't until 2006 that I transitioned to digital. So, I guess I'm more about learning by doing than going through books. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love books and I like manuals and I'll use them as reference, but I'd much rather jump right in and see how far I can get before getting into trouble. And then, having to work it out. But yeah, it's the pressure of the project and the special demands and requirements of the task, which have helped me, evolve and change over the years. So that's pretty much it. Thanks, Jen.
All right, so I have some large questions for all of the artists. One is, so if Mindy, you think that this is okay to ask each individual person, but the question was actually from Dave Duranko, who is on our board, AAWR, has kept us in financial straight and narrows for a long time. And he's had a question for all of the artists. How and when did you know you wanted to be an artist? So, wow, right? I'll repeat it a couple times, but I'll start with Lee, and we'll go down the line if you guys are willing. Would you want to do?
I think always is the word that comes to mind. There are a lot of artists scattered throughout my family. Most of them, unless haven't taken it that seriously. My great-grandmother painted until she married and had 9 children, I believe. That was the end of her painting career. I have a cousin who teaches art. I have an aunt who was a painter and art school graduate, and my mother did many, many artistic things, one after another, sequentially. So it's just something I grew up with.
I love that it's in the family too. I also like the women tradition in your family too, that there's also a strong women as artists in your family.
Pursued art. Well, I'm wrong. No, I had a cousin who was a medical photographer until they, he was displaced by computerized images. Mm-hmm.
That's still really cool to be a family of artists. I love it. And so let me hit up that same fantastic big question to Margaret next. Get that? And so to Margaret, again, the question is, how and when did you know you wanted to be an artist?
Well, again, my father was very artistic. He came to USA from Czechoslovakia, and after he died, we found a diary that he had written, My Journey to America, and he had line drawings that looked like a Picasso, a line drawing of the ship that brought him here. And he was always building things, making toys, windmills. So there was always some kind of art going on in our family. And I was the youngest of 6, and my older brothers and sisters all did portraits and art. And as the youngest sibling, I wanted to be like them, So I just started drawing, and when I went to elementary school, it was Catholic school, the nuns knew that I loved to draw, so they would have me do pictures for the bulletin boards. Easter, I drew lilies. Christmas, I drew baby Jesus. And so for some reason, I was just drawing and painting all the time, and I didn't really go to a professional college until my kids were grown, and that was something I always wanted to do. So then I went to the Cleveland Institute of Art, and then from there I got my bachelor's, and that was what I was meant to do. But it was always there,
I love that. I love that you went back to do it. Like you weren't just content to let it ride. You just went in. That's so good. Then I'm going to throw this question over to Stuart so let me go ahead and make sure that my mute, oh good, very good, thank you. And Stu, so again, the question, how and when did you know you wanted to be an artist?
I guess for me, that's kind of an odd question. I never really thought of myself as an artist. I always knew that I was a photographer and a photojournalist and a documentarian, but I never really thought of my work as inhabiting the realm of artistry until about maybe 25 years ago, when people started telling me, hey, you ought to enter that in a show, or you ought to submit it to this competition or something. To me, it was just photojournalism, telling a story, creating a narrative, making a record of something like the construction of the Innerbelt Bridge, or maybe the demolition of something. But no, from my early days, it was simply photography.
I love it. It's funny that you say you never identified as being an artist, and your work is incredibly well composed and artistic versus just a solid record of events.
Well,
So.
thank you. And I guess in all honesty, it was probably, I did cheat. I was surrounded by my father. And
Moses Pearl, one of our longest history archived artists, just amazing work.
and he did take me with him on his Sunday morning sketches and painting outings and whatnot. And I spent a lot of time, sitting watching him paint in his studio there. So I guess there was a little bit of osmosis going on there.
And for those who aren't aware, that Stuart's sister, Charlene Pearl Green, is also an artist. She's a painter, and she is an instructor at Tri-C, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, very, very accomplished, excellent artist.
Amazing.
And I've sat in on her classes, and I've learned a great deal about how to critique art by listening to her.
I'm sure she's very good at it. And then finally, we're going to throw it to, and this I believe will be our last one, we're going to throw it to Rebecca. Got you there. And Rebecca, perfect. So the question again was, how and when did you know you wanted to be an artist?
Well, there are two early childhood memories that come to mind, and I have a faint memory of very, very early. One of my earliest memories is of being in my grandfather's house, and they had just taken wallpaper cleaner and cleaned all the walls, the soot that comes up from the coal stoves and things like that. And they were perfectly clean. And I remember taking my big fat crayon that was given to me, and I started drawing on the wallpaper. And no one was really happy about that, particularly my grandfather, who had just spent 3 days cleaning it. And my mother said that it was one of those habits that it was hard to break. They had to take away my crayons. And then in the 3rd grade, I remember, like Margaret, I was in Catholic school, and the nuns were going around saying, what do you want to be when you grow up? And everybody was going, the boys would say, I want to be a priest. All the little girls said, I want to be a nun. And I was about 5th from the back, from being the last person, and it got to me, and I thought, because I was thinking, I don't want to be a nun, I don't want to be a priest. And then when it came to me, and she said, what do you want to be when you grow up? I thought all the other girls said nun, so I said nun artist. And that was it. So I was 8 years old, I knew, and the rest is history.
I love it. So we are coming up on the about the end of our time, so I'm going to kick this back over to Mindy Tousely. Thank you all for your amazing answers, and here is Mindy.
Oh, thanks everybody. I thought there was like one more question in there that was actually kind of good, and
You want to do one more?
Yeah, we're only at 8:15. I think it was the Gail Pritchard question, if anybody had any trouble working during the shutdown.
Oh, yeah.
And maybe rather than ask everyone, if you want to answer it, raise your hand, artists.
That's a great idea. Go. So again, the question from Gail Pritchard, have any of you had trouble working during the shutdown? So physically, do a little hand raise. Oh, I see Rebecca. Go ahead, Rebecca.
Yeah. Yes, I think it has been troublesome, because in uncertain times, I have found myself kind of floundering, because there's always in the back of my mind that preoccupation of the kind of situation that we're in. So for that reason, those kinds of thoughts would come in and kind of cloud my concentration or initiative, so it would create some problems with having initiative to do it because of the uncertain times. Absolutely.
That makes sense, that it's not just like getting to work, it's actually being in the right frame of mind. Did any of the other artists want to to comment on trouble working on quarantine?
No, guess nobody has any trouble working. That's good.
That's wonderful.
You know, it's pretty natural for us as artists because we normally work in isolation anyway to just actually take advantage of this. But I completely understand where Rebecca's coming from with the kind of mindset thing that's going on. So I just want to thank everybody for joining us again. I'd like to say that there is a little poll that pops up when you go to leave the Zoom. And if you'd like to take the poll, we appreciate your answers. And if you don't take the poll, we're going to send you a survey anyway next week. So if you have to choose between answering one or the other, please answer the survey that comes from us through SurveyMonkey, because that's the really most important one for us. I will also say that we are taping these webinars. The part 1 that we taped last week finally is ready for us to upload to Facebook, and we're going to do that. And we are playing around with the idea of premiering it on Facebook, so those who could not join the webinar last week can actually see it again. And it would be sort of like a live watch party like we did with the video for the exhibition. So we'll let you know about that. But it's gonna be up there within a week or so. And the one from tonight, we'll have to go through it and work the magic on it that will allow us to put it up onto Facebook, because even though these things seem seamlessly, it does take a little bit of time and effort to get them from one format into another. I think that's it. I'm going to close by sharing some more pictures from each of the artists, their work that is in the members show. And then there will be a screen if any of you are interested in the archives and want some information. It'll be up there on the last screen. And I think I'm just going to ask everybody to wave and say goodbye as we share our screens and we leave. Come on, there we go. Okay, time to go. Good night, everybody. Take care, and thanks for joining us. Thank you. Bye. Bye, Stuart.
Bye.
Are we signing off now?
Yep, bye. Thank you.
Okay, bye. I'm gonna hit the off button.
Bye, Lee.
Bye.
Bye, Mindy.
Megan.
Bye, Lee.
Bye, guys. Thank you so much.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, Megan. Thank you.
Bye. Have a great night, everybody. Thank you.